All right. Excellent. Again, thank you all for being here. I'm Jeff Echek. I'm the Associate Director of Field Education here at the Mandel School at Case Western Reserve University. It's a Friday afternoon going into Labor Day weekend, so we would appreciate your time and partnership any day of the week, any day of the year, but today especially. So thanks for being here. Thanks for partnering with us. And, you'll hear me say this a few times throughout today's 2-hour training, but we appreciate how you're supporting our students and also the impact that you're making on the social work profession. So today we're just going to talk about some of the basics of being a field instructor and make sure you're prepared to do so. So again, I'm Jeff Echek, Associate Director of Field Education. My co-presenter today is Robert Lieberman. He's one of our field faculty advisors. If anyone wants to, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. It's not necessary, but you're more than welcome to do so. I want to briefly introduce our field education team. There's a few of them are in here. We have field faculty advisors that work with our different program formats, whether it be our weekend MSW program, our online MSW program, or our on-campus weekly MSW program. The Assistant Dean of Field Education, Nicole Parker, wanted to be here today, but unfortunately she's not here, but she sends her regards and her appreciation. So hopefully some of these faces look familiar to you, as many of you have partnered with us in the past, and we look forward to connecting as we move forward. So what I want to start with is just a general overview of what you'd like to leave here with today. This is a 2-hour training all about being a field instructor, but each of you may have something unique that you want to take away from this. So I welcome you to put some of that stuff in the chat, and we'll take a quick look at it, and then we'll jump into the overview of the training and make sure we're going to meet some of these needs. I want to mention too, throughout today's training, if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat, and one of our field faculty advisors will be happy to respond and give you that answer that you're looking for. So again, today's training is being recorded. Hopefully you were notified of that. So keep that in mind. We do ask that you keep your audio muted throughout this training. But yeah, we really want to make sure we answer any questions. So put those in the chat as we go. Today, we're going to review some information about the Mandel School. Some of you are new partners with the Mandel School. We'll talk about our approach to field education. We'll talk about the different roles within field education and the responsibilities of each. We'll talk about policies around safety, talk about what it's like being a student in terms of some of the assignments they complete. We'll also talk about just some general approaches to being a field instructor with adult learners, and make sure that you're well equipped to take on this endeavor. I do also want to mention that this is a good starting point in terms of being a field instructor to give you a nice solid foundation. We'll talk about this later as well, but throughout the year, we also present these events every month. They're called Field First Fridays. So we'll post a link in the chat with a copy of the flyer that we use. Our first Field First Friday of the year is coming up on September 6th, where we'll talk about, just being a supervisor of a student. These are not offered for CEUs, rather they're just meant to be discussions with fellow field instructors, where you can share what's working for you, share challenges, and hopefully kind of develop a nice community of support. I also do want to mention at the end of today's training, there will be an evaluation. So we do want your feedback, and please stick around for that because we definitely appreciate what you have to say. All right, let's jump in. Mandel School has been here for a while. We're pretty proud of our history. We were founded in 1915 as the School of Applied Social Sciences. We were one of the first schools of social work, if not the first School of Social Work to really focus on competency-based learning. We have just these points that we really try to, reference as a historical asset to the profession while also building upon that history and becoming, an even better institution. For our program formats, we started our on-campus weekend format in 1987. And then we started our online MSW format in 2013. And these program formats came out of a need of education for different students based on what's happening in their lives. So I'm not sure which formats each one of you works with, but it'll be one of those three, either the weekend format, the weekly format, or the online format. There are some differences within these formats. So this diagram shows you the big difference being how many hours per week our students are completing based on the format they're in. So you'll see that for our weekend format, they're completing fewer hours per week compared to the weekly format. You might be wondering how does that work? Well, students in the weekend format and the online format are in field education for a much longer amount of time. So they have fewer hours per week and fewer hours per semester, but they're in field for several semesters. For online weekend, they complete field education for 7 semesters. We all get to the same destination in terms of the amount of field hours. There's just different routes to get there. One thing as social workers, we always want to be mission driven. So for our mission, it's to guide social work and nonprofit organization students to integrate theory and practice in dynamic community settings. Oftentimes when we're looking at how we're serving students and teaching our students from a field education standpoint, we really have to harken back to this, and we want to make sure that this is driving what we're doing. Our field education program is quite large, I would say. We've partnered with over 1,000 partners, not just in Northeast Ohio, but with our online format. We have partners across the country in different states. We appreciate many of you may even be in different states and working with our online format. So thank you for that partnership. Depending on the program format, whether it be on campus weekly or on campus weekend or online, we have different paths of study. So you'll notice our weekly format has several paths of study compared to our online and our weekend formats. One thing we do really stress to our students, and we welcome you to also stress this to students, even though we have these paths of study, we really try to stress the versatility of a Master of Social Work degree. So, just because your path of study is working with children and families, you should still have a versatile skill set and knowledge base to work with other types of client populations, with a diverse range of communities, and through a number of different situations. So we really try to preach that versatility piece of our Master of Social Work degree. I'm sure many of you can speak to that and can look no further than some of our career paths as social workers, where we've kind of jumped around from area to area, and that's great. That versatility is key, and we definitely want our students to approach their field education that way and to embrace learning in different situations with different clients. We have a range of goals within field education. That first one is a big one, integrating the knowledge, skills, values, and processes into practice. Oftentimes, we're so focused on developing I should say, students and us to some extent are focused on the knowledge and skills portion of that, what to know and how to practice. But we also want to stress, developing our sense of values and our social work identity, as well as those cognitive and affective processes. So how do we feel? How do we think in terms of these situations we're in as social workers? So again, we definitely welcome that when you as field instructors are able to emphasize that piece beyond just knowledge and skills. With field education, the big purpose behind that is to integrate our academic learning into real world practice. And we'll talk about that a little bit further. This is a chance to really, apply what we're taking away from the classroom, to learn from the application, to reflect on it, and then to continue to grow. This last bullet point's a big one too: develop self-reflection and critical thinking. I think oftentimes in field education, and this is sometimes driven by students, it's not so much our practicum partners, but sometimes it becomes real emphasis on the administrative side of things, and sometimes the number of clients and notes and that stuff. We always want to make sure we're preserving space for self-reflection. So even though in, your hour of weekly supervision with a student, there's a lot to go over in terms of numbers and productivity and that stuff. We want to make sure that we're always setting aside that time to step back, look at what the students experienced and reflect on that, and really think critically about where they're going and where they've been as a student. That leads to growth, and also leads to the student having a good sense of confidence. I mean, if you're here as a field instructor, that implies that you have a Master of Social Work degree or an equivalent. You're familiar with field education. We don't need to go too far in depth with this, but some of this bears repeating. While field education accounts for about 20% of our MSW curriculum in terms of credits, the actual percentage of time students apply to their field education is a much greater percentage. In terms of the impact of field education, I think each one of you, can definitely recall what you did for your field education practicum, who it was with, probably who your field instructor was, and also what the big takeaways were, whether they be great or not so great. The moral is that it's impactful. It's incredibly impactful. We welcome you to speak with your students about your past experiences, regardless of when those were. It's still really valuable, and we remind our students, hey, your field instructor has been in your shoes before. So definitely, bringing that into some of your conversations can help give a nice sense of perspective and give your students some comfort. But the Council on Social Work Education continues to stress field education as our signature pedagogy. We always compare it with, teachers, they have student teaching, doctors have their rounds and their residencies. This is what it's been for master's level social workers for a while. And we're proud of what we do in field education. This isn't going to change anytime soon. And it continues to be an integral part of our curriculum. With this, we have a model in terms of how we approach practicum, in terms of students have their learning agreements. So each semester, your student will craft a learning agreement, which is essentially a roadmap of what they're going to be doing for their practicum, in order to develop competence in these 10 areas of competence. That said, that roadmap is great to start with. But we also want you to encourage students to embrace unplanned learning activities. So in this profession, things pop up unplanned, and we have to be okay with, hey, you know what? This situation just occurred. Let's hop in the car and let's go. Hey, this crisis occurred. Let's go work with the social worker who's managing it and learn from it. We really want you to encourage students to embrace those unplanned learning opportunities. So it's a nice combination of having things mapped out in the learning agreement and articulately planned, but also embracing, hey, this is a once annual occurrence. This thing's happening. Let's go check it out. And hopefully your students will also embrace that. In practicum, we also understand that it's, we don't want the student to just be thrown into the deep end. There should be a gradual integration into professional practice. So it starts with observing, and not just, passive observation, but rather some active observation with real intentional reflection. We actually have some really neat tools on our field education resources page that can guide these opportunities for a student to shadow and learn that way. So Rob, if you wouldn't mind putting that resource link in the chat, that would be fantastic. But we have nice tools to guide students to learn through observation. We consistently stress the value of that to students. Sometimes students just want to get in there and do things and have great levels of independence. And sometimes we as field faculty advisors, and hopefully you as field instructors, are pumping that brake. Just like in driver's training, when the driving instructor has that side brake, we have to use it sometimes and really stress the need to really be gradual in our integration into more independent learning. With that, we also want the students' practicum learning to be progressively advancing. So what the student is doing in their first semester, they should be building on that and taking on more complex roles and responsibilities as they proceed through that semester and onto the next semester. So that's something to think about. We challenge our students. Sometimes I'll look at a student's learning agreement. I'll compare it with the learning agreement from the previous semester side by side, and I'll say, these are too similar. So number one, either you have to find some new additional complexities to what you're doing, or maybe you are already doing something that's a little more advanced and simply need to give yourself credit for it. So we really want those progressively advancing learning opportunities. And that last bullet point's an important one too, especially with kind of some of the developments with practicum and what it looks like nowadays. Some students are being paid for their practicum and completing their field hours, or they're being financially compensated in some way. That's becoming a little more prevalent. But when we get into that, then suddenly the need to emphasize productivity starts to increase. So the need to be productive. So we always want to monitor that, and again, make sure that the educational purpose is prioritized over productivity. We definitely understand if there's compensation that leads to that, that requirement to some extent, but this is still a field practicum. The purpose is still for the student to learn and grow as a social work student. So that's something we try to keep track of. And, if you ever want any support with that, or you want to talk through it, please work closely with the student's field faculty advisor. One thing I also want to mention in terms of our practicum model, sometimes students will have a hybrid or a remote practicum. Hybrid meaning that they do some things in person, some things remotely. We only utilize these if an in-person practicum is just not available. Those types of arrangements need to be reviewed and approved by the student's field faculty advisor or somebody else here within the field education department. So if you're looking to change the nature of a student's practicum experience, please make sure you're talking with the student's field faculty advisor and making sure that it's appropriate for the student. So I hinted at this just a few minutes ago. We do have policies in place now where students may accrue field hours while they're completing employment activities. These types of situations need to be vetted and approved by us within the field education department. The tasks that the student's completing also need to have a direct link to the competencies at a master's level. So if the student has, let's say, a undergraduate degree in sociology, and the work that they're doing is, appropriate for someone with an undergraduate degree, it probably won't meet the requirements to serve as their practicum for their MSW program. But sometimes we can integrate new learning and new practice opportunities that make it appropriately challenging at a master's level. So if you have a student who is in one of these situations where they're completing an employment-based practicum, you've likely been part of that conversation and probably signed off on things. So we support that if it's appropriate. we understand how it does make learning and field education a little more manageable. But again, it is something that we really try to be thorough when reviewing. In those instances, the field instructor can be the student's employment supervisor as long as they meet the other requirements like any other field instructor. Again, that's something that we review, and if we ever have any questions about that type of an arrangement, the field faculty advisor will speak to you. All right. So that's just kind of a nice foundation of field education and some of the policy stuff. We'd like to get into these small groups and talk a little bit more about your own experiences. So, try to put on that thinking cap or hop in your Wayback Machines. But we're going to get into breakout groups. And here's what we'd really like you to talk about. Number one, what impacted your experiences as an MSW practicum student have on your growth and professional development? And we'll put these questions in the chat so you can read them while you're in your breakout group. Number two, how did your own experiences as a practicum student impact you as a field instructor? So kind of bridging that gap based on what your field education experience was, how has that shaped you to be who you are as a field instructor? And then finally, what did you value most from your field experience? It can be something that went really well. It could be just something that maybe didn't go that well, but was a great learning experience. Who knows? Something that you still value to this day. All right. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to break into groups. If you can give me just a hot minute here. We have 66 people. So let's break it into, we'll break into 15 groups. So you'll be prompted to join a breakout group. You'll have to click on a button to join. You'll then be in that breakout session. Once you're in that session, please unmute your audio, turn on your video, and feel free to chat with your fellow field instructors. Okay, so we're going to create these. We're going to take just about 5 minutes, and we'll send you a kind of a warning that the session's going to close. So just be on the lookout for that. All right, but otherwise, hopefully you have some rich conversations and are able to, recall some great experiences from your own field education. All right, Rob, it looks like most folks are in their rooms. There are a few people that haven't joined.
What?
You put those all in the chat.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
I'm gonna have to throw those in a broadcast too, just so they.
Oh,
Well, those disappear, don't they?
yeah, they probably go like. But they're in the chat, so the chat should be there.
How are we for time, Rob? You okay?
It's not 27. So,
I think we're about where we should be timing wise, right?
I think so.
Okay.
How long did last time?
Yeah, we're just about halfway through the first half. So we're about a quarter of the way through.
There's one more. Actually, it's yeah. There's one person of him.
Should I let them know they have about a minute, Rob?
On mute. Yeah. Yeah, pop it for a second.
Excited about. But anyways, just really got, talking about that signature pedagogy, really instilled that in me and really got me out there doing IOP and, direct contact with clients right, within a few months. And it was just amazing and empowering. So.
Hey, everybody, welcome back. Just a reminder, when you come back, if you could please mute your phones. Or your audio, I should say.
Back, everybody. Second. So before we get into some more information here, I wanted to welcome you back and also see if anyone would like to share from the breakout room, any of those kind of questions and reflections you had thinking back on your time as a student. Raise your hand.
Okay.
Go for it.
All right. So we talked about just having that grace to learn and being patient with the learning process and with that person. I talked about like just having that with my person that I was doing my internship with, and which made me want to learn more. But we also talked on the opposite side of that student feeling like they're being thrown to the wolves and how uncomfortable that feeling is. So that we want to make sure that we are, cognizant of those type of things.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Um,
Similar
Nikki,
to
one
that
second.
group.
Oh.
Yeah, so is it okay if I go?
I'm not sure. Let me see. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Similar to that, we talked a lot about the value of providing a lot of shadowing experiences for students. And again, like Patricia was saying, we want our students to feel comfortable. And there were situations where we maybe got put into a position to provide therapy a little bit sooner than we were probably ready and had to learn a little bit more on the fly. But, we want to be able to give as much shadowing opportunities and, obviously time for students to ask questions right after. What did you notice in shadowing? Or do you have any like questions for how that went, or, anything you noticed? So a lot of shadowing is important.
Yes, shadowing is very important, I think. And very good points too. And we'll talk a little bit here about for students because everyone's coming in kind of at different levels of experience and kind of keeping that in mind that where people are and catering to that. I think there was one other hand up. I think I saw. If you'd like to come up, you go ahead. I think it was Melissa, I'm not sure.
Yeah, that was actually me. And my experiences was very similar to what actually was just said. I remember my first week, I was given a full caseload of clients and really just thrown into there. And my very first client, my very first day that I interacted with on my own doing an assessment, I will never forget that day. And I will say that, working in a clinical environment that provided so many different services, I really value the experience and I did learn a lot. But also, my takeaway from that now is that my current interns, I want to make sure that they're not overloaded. We really start slow and build off of each learning competency and incorporate more work throughout the semester and more responsibilities, because I don't ever want anyone to feel just sort of thrown into it and feel like they don't have the chance to learn and reflect and have those conversations and build off of those skills.
Thank you so much. I agree with all of that. I as a field instructor, back to my time as a student, I know how important that is to have that. And I've seen students, that I've worked with who come in thinking they're also ready to take on a lot more and kind of get into things. It's like, okay, we gotta slow down. So as a field instructor, it's important to be able to recognize where students are in their learning, knowing kind of when to push, but also when to kind of pull back a little bit and pause and reflect. So thank you. Is there anyone else before we move on who would like to share anything? All right. Well, thank you to those who did. I hope everyone had wonderful discussions as well, thinking back to your time as a student. And we'll go ahead and move on to roles and responsibilities in field education. And you can see the diagram here, and we have the student on top, and that is intentional. So they're the focal point here of the educational process and their learning. But they have relationships with other parties here as well. So it starts also with you all at the bottom left there, the organization and the field instructor. So you are very much part of the students' learning, communicating with them, teaching them, and doing those things to make this practicum experience the best and providing those learning opportunities. And then to the right, you see that arrow goes to the Mandel School, where will be our field faculty advisors, our point of contact. So we're also involved in our job. As you can see, the arrows going to the student and the organization is to support both of you. So to help the student, help support the organization in that learning. So we are working together to make this the most valuable experience for the student. All right, so talking about the organization's roles and responsibilities. So first and foremost, as a lot of you have already started, some students this week and some again next week. It's orienting students to the organization's policies and procedures, especially we're talking a little bit about safety as well. So making sure they're familiar with what's expected. Each space is a little different, but knowing what those are, it helps really set that foundation for them. In addition to that, practice opportunities. So helping them connect with them, letting them know what's available. So looking at that from within each competency at both the generalist and specialized level, and looking at all systems levels. And this is especially important also for generalist year students who are required to identify learning opportunities at the individual, family, group, organization, and community levels. They're going to be putting those opportunities on their learning agreement. So making sure that those are available for students at the specialized level, having those in those areas in practice. We also make sure that organizations providing opportunities to develop competence across all stages of the social work process. This is also worked into learning agreements, so engagement, assessment, intervention, and evaluation. So students will be familiar with these and making sure that those opportunities are there for them through the organization. So field organization orientation, kind of thinking back as a student, this could be something that is intimidating for them as they're beginning and taking all this information, especially for new students starting school as well. So practical organizations required to orient students to those policies, services, protocols, and procedures. So any written policies, reviewing them, making sure that you go through that. Talking about medical emergency plans and protocols. What's that like for the organization? What does that look like in practice? What should they expect? Supervision plan. So what are your expectations, both of them, and also allowing them time to share about their expectations of you as a field instructor. I think that can really help to talk about things like communication and learning styles and what works best. Kind of going back to that line, everybody's coming in a little different and recognizing what each student needs. And having those conversations early at the beginning of practicums can really help to set the foundation so everyone knows what is expected. Reviewing our manual. There's a lot of information in there. So if you have a question, there probably will be an answer to it there. And we'll talk about in a second about a little bit about safety policies and protocols, especially for example, if you're having students potentially going out into the community, going over some of those. And then as Jeff mentioned about employment based, kind of reviewing those, also safety policies and protocols, especially if the student is in a different department for the practicum where they're working. And I do want to highlight again this field placement orientation checklist here at the bottom. That is a really useful tool, especially in the beginning stages of practicum. It lays out a lot of common tasks and things that we've seen student experience and help them get one kind of oriented. So it really is a great resource to use and reference, especially if you haven't had a student in manager, you're not kind of sure like what should be doing this. It gives you a good guide for that as well. So safety and field, I'm not going to go through all of these. They're highlighted also in our the full policies and our field education manuals. But just kind of want to highlight a few here that are important. Both organization and field instructor responsibility to make sure. So things that students are not permitted to do, as you can see. So not working alone with clients with a history of violence or aggression. Related to that, not restraining clients or distributing medication. So those are not things, they may be exposed to that in there. It's not things that students should be engaging in. As I mentioned, if students going into the community, making sure they have proper training, time to talk and ask questions, know what those safety protocols are for that and who to contact if they need someone. I know we have students who are doing placements going to communities, in the evenings, for example, working with families. And so was like going into the home without, I remember going through trainings as I was working on like everything from where to park my car, what to leave in my car, what to take in with me, where to sit. So going through those types of things with them is really important. Again, especially in the beginning, and then reminding them as well as they get into those activities more so. field instructor roles and responsibilities. And this is something I'm very familiar with as a field instructor for many years. I've worked at Belfair. So it's something well versed in, hopefully, and understand is where you're coming from also as field instructors when you're having experiences with your students. So as it says, field instructors are required to hold an MSW or equivalent degree and at least 2 years of postgraduate experience. Something that comes up from time to time is licensure, which is not a prerequisite. So as long as an MSW and 2 years of postgraduate experience is there, you can be a field instructor. I even have had 1 or 2 field instructors who don't have a license or only have an LSW, for example, but have many years of experience both in the field and as a field instructor. It's providing weekly individual supervision for that 60 to 90 minutes. So that's really important. That's that time. Especially if we know you all are also busy and lots of other responsibilities. So you may not be seeing your students as much during the week. So really making sure that that time is a priority. It might have to be adjusted depending on everyone's schedules. Hopefully you have a consistent time. That's something I found helpful, but also knowing that things happen, right? Could be vacation, whatever. So if it's missed, making sure to schedule it in as soon as possible. Prioritizing student orientation and safety, which we talked about. And then you're also a big part of the learning agreement development, and helping guiding students, providing feedback and learning opportunities for them. So you're able to help shape that with them. You'll review it and you'll sign it as well. We have field conferences once a semester. So, participating in those and ensure that that's an opportunity also, again, for us to troubleshoot, talk about what progress has been made and set goals for the future. We also have our evaluations, which occur at the end of the semester. So that's really, again, a time for me to provide feedback to students. Actively observing and providing feedback for at least once a semester, but hopefully more, so that you can accurately kind of tell them where they are in their learning, what you're seeing that's going well, what things can be improved upon, in helping them. The more and you're able to do that, the better I think you can get the feedback, and also students know that, okay, they're understanding what I'm doing, right? Time reports, so students will send those over to you with their hours and activities, so making sure that you review them. Please take a minute to look at those, make sure they're accurate. And then maintain open dialogue with the student and task supervisor. So if there's questions, things like that, there's someone else involved in the student's learning, making sure you're communicating with them. And also with us here at the Mandel School's field faculty advisors. Reach out to us if you have questions. We've had field instructors do that. If there's something, it could be a little thing, could be something more concerned with the student, but getting us involved to kind of see what the best course of action can be helpful as well. One other thing I'd like to talk about just for a second, which we get into external field instructors. So we know some of you are field instructors, but aren't necessarily working for or affiliated with the organization the students is at. So making sure you also take some time to get to know the student, know the organization, so you can provide that feedback. All right, so task supervisor roles and responsibility. As I had just mentioned with the external field instructor position. So in that case, where there isn't someone at an organization who is able to provide supervision as a field instructor, we sometimes look outside of that for an external field instructor. In that case, where the field instructor is either off-site or in a different department, we would have a task supervisor. So that person is also, and some of you may be a task supervisor here today, right? And so you're doing things like providing day-to-day oversight of field activities. You're often the student's main point of contact for things like scheduling and other responsibilities, but also communicating students' progress and how they're doing to the field instructor. If you're able to sit in on supervision from time to time, that would be great. At the bottom there, it talks about participating in the field conference. We want you there because you're maybe in the most contact with the students and awareness of what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. You will be identified on the learning agreement, but the task supervisor would not sign any of the field documentation. That would be up to the field instructor. So going back to that communication, making sure if there's, let's say, a question of hours, helping to confirm that for the field instructor.
I think they're done in notice.
All right, student roles and responsibilities. And the first thing I'd just like to say here is that these are graduate students at the master's level. And they're expected to drive their own learning process. Right, so that's why I go back to that diagram there with them at the top. So they're really in the driver's seat here. Among their kind of roles and responsibilities, so collaborating with you as field instructors to develop a learning agreement, and complete their evaluations, preparing an agenda and questions for weekly supervision. This is something we as advisors really push with students to make sure they're prepared. We emphasize it's their time to get questions answered, to process different experiences. So being prepared is important. Again, as a field instructor, I've seen students who come in with a detailed list and agenda ready to go. I have others who have literally tracked down in other rooms of the building to see where they are if they're ready for field instruction. So that's something we expect the students to do. Communicating relevant field education due dates and timelines with you is important. There are different assignments that involve your input outside of, say, learning agreement. So making sure that you're aware of those, and also when things like time reports and that learning agreement are due. Along with that, communicating that so you have time, right, to complete those tasks. Being proactive about scheduling the field conference. So all of our advisors, we provide students with the process for that, and they'll work with you to identify time. Completing practicum course assignments. So they have different parts of their learning. They're important. Professional development. So we emphasize students being lifelong learners, not just while they're here in school, but after. And to help support that, they engage in professional development activities. They're self-directed. They could be conferences, trainings. They're also, there are things I've had students who engaged in school board or city council meetings, for example, as far as their professional development. They reflect on that in their assignments. They have to get their hours. That varies depending on the format and where they are in the program. And then monthly time reports for you all to review and sign that have those hours and notes of what they're doing. We also want students to be active in seeking constructive feedback and engaging in learning. You should really be asking those questions, taking the time to process situations what they've learned with you, and finding out whether they did well, where can they improve. Lastly here, addressing any concerns, issues, or problems in a professional manner. So we'll talk about here in a little bit today about what the problem solving process that we have, but we expect students to do that in a professional manner. Student accommodations. So it is responsibility of the student to convey this to each field instructor and organization. But they apply it to them through the CWRU Office of Disability Resources. And then there can be collaboration again as needed with the field instructor and advisor on that. So students who go through the process will have something written that specifies how things are integrated into their field education. So if they're questioned, the student, it's their responsibility to communicate that with you all. And one other note, accommodations are not retroactive. So they'll be from whatever date moving forward, but not previous to that. We'll talk a little bit about here at the Mandel School, our field faculty advisor roles and responsibilities. We're here to help support you and the student. So we serve as that liaison between you. We also teach our students practicum courses and assign their grades for practicum. So for our general year students, that's their organizational theory and practice classes in addition to their practicums. So we will be the one kind of working and reviewing all of these assignments that they're completing. We also can provide feedback and support throughout the semester. So again, students are asked questions, field instructors. So if they get something, please don't hesitate to contact us. Answer whatever questions you have. We also are there to participate in students' field conferences along with you, and if there's a task supervisor. So that would be for all of us to get together, and that's at one time a semester again to meet and discuss the students' progress, how things are going, and planning ahead. After you've signed time reports, they come to us to do the same. So we're the final signature on it for the students. We also again review and evaluate the students' learning agreements and evaluations. which we're talking about. We get those, and then the students are also assigned grades for those by us. Also, as like for today, providing training opportunities for field instructors and task supervisors. So please refer back to that flyer in the chat a little bit ago. We send some of those reminders also out through Tavera, through our email system. And then also facilitate and offer consultations in all aspects of practicum education. So again, if you have questions, concerns about a student, what's going on, please don't hesitate to reach out. The earlier you do that, I think the better to help support the student. Sometimes something might seem like it's a bigger issue than it is, but when we reach out and kind of get on the same page, then we can help support them. Likewise, if things kind of linger, they can grow into something more. I'm sure you've all seen in your own practice. All right, so as I mentioned, addressing student challenges. And you see we really embrace a problem solving model here. But one of the things that really helps prevent a lot of those challenges is having clear expectations. Going back to that orientation piece and setting those up early on. Having consistent communication, whether it's through your weekly supervision or other meetings. So not waiting. Also, if there's something, constant feedback. So letting students know how they're doing, letting them know where they can improve. Again, doing this kind of early and consistently is important. Something really, for example, shouldn't show up on the evaluation at the end of the semester. That's been going on since week 3. It's something to address early and hopefully take care of it then. So as I said, we embrace problem solving model that involves student self-advocacy, doing a full assessment of the situation, and supportive collaboration. So that might be, be team meetings with everyone involved. It could be one-on-one meetings, conversations with others, depending on what's appropriate. But we really want to try to gather as much information as possible. And you all play a very important role in addressing these student challenges. So really embracing that role of educator. So if you see something, please direct that, directly address that with them, talk to them about that in supervision. If it's something that happens, you don't have supervision for until the end of the following week or something like that, make sure, pull them aside sooner. Talk to them, let them know what's going on. I think students would appreciate that rather than waiting and having things built up. And if it's something you feel like you're kind of reaching out, communicating with your students, feel like faculty advisors to help support and get guidance. Sometimes it can be simple, just kind of informing us of what you're planning to do and have that word field instructors. Let me know, hey, this is what I'm going to do. I'll let you know if I need anything. I get to the feel confidence saying, oh, it's already been addressed. So you have the ability to do that as well. All right, Tavera. So all those assignments we talked about are really in our Tavera, which is our web-based system for field documentation. One thing I'd like to point out that reviews and approvals are linear. So that usually the student will start the document, initiate it, complete their part, move on to you, you'll do the same, and then you'll get to us as field faculty advisors. One thing I do want to add is that if you see something on a document and you're not sure or you think it should be changed, please send it back for feedback or changes. Please send it back, let the student know. You don't have to wait till it gets to us because if we see that, there's a good chance we're going to send it back and start that process. So if you see something, if the hours don't look right, learning activities aren't quite what you're expecting, feel free, you have the ability to send it back to them and provide feedback on what needs to be revised. So within Tavera, you'll see the student's learning agreement, whether the generalist or specialized here, time tracks, monthly time reports, and then evaluations at the end of the semester. So everyone, should be have invited to register. But please do so if you haven't yet. And if you think you don't have a registration invite, please let us know. You can reach out to mandelfield.case.edu to check in about that. We also have a lot of resources available, again, on our field education resources page. There are some specific instructions for both students and field instructors on how to complete common tasks in Tavera. Students have access to those in Canvas as well. Again, if you have any questions, please reach out to us. Right. So over to Jeff.
Thanks, Rob. All right, hopefully everyone's in a good spot. We're just about halfway there. We use this slide in pretty much every presentation we do because number one, it's Cleveland, so we love it. And number two, the analogy holds true. Practicum is the bridge between classroom and practice. So you're taking things from the classroom, whether it be, knowledge or theory or skills, or maybe it's some things that students are learning in terms of like role playing or group discussions in class. They then take that bridge across and get to the place of real life application. So that's on the student. We tell students this isn't one of those nice bridges with a walkway that you see at the airports where you just step on and ride it. No, you have to take that step. So it has to be really intentional from the student. We encourage them to come into supervision with you and talk about what they're learning in class, maybe review some of their course syllabi, talk about the assignments that they're doing in their policy class or in their, in their human behavioral and social environment class. That's on them to bring that to you. It has to be very intentional. The other thing we stress when it comes to this bridge analogy is that that bridge has traffic going both ways. So not only are they bringing classroom learning into, your world and in the practicum setting, but they're also taking their practicum experiences back into the classroom. So when they're in class and talking about, some different intervention approach, maybe they're talking about motivational interviewing, and maybe your students practicing it in field. They have that experience. They can throw their hand up and talk about it. They can say, hey, here's what I'm doing in field right now. This is how it's going. These are the challenges. And when they do that intentionally, not only does that help their classmates hear about, your students' learning experience, but it also just kind of solidifies that learning the student had. The more they talk about it, the more they reflect on it, the better and the more likely they're able to repeat successful practice. So it is vital for the student. We really stress this with them to be intentional about bringing things from class into field and vice versa. And for that reason, we use a concurrent model, meaning that regardless of what format the student is in, they need to be concurrently enrolled in field courses and academic courses. It needs to be that way throughout their time in the program. That way they have that constant ability to apply what they're learning in class in a field setting. With that, they also need opportunities that are at the same level of, whatever classes they're in. So we'll talk about that in a minute, what the differences are from generalist year to specialized year. Just some kind of nuts and bolts about field education. Depending on the program format, students will take anywhere from 4 to 7 practicum courses. And that's really just the course credit they receive for completing their field hours. So again, if your student is in the weekly format, they complete 4 semesters of field education. If they're in the online or weekend format, they do 7 semesters, but fewer hours per semester. In addition to those courses, each student completes organizational theory and practice courses. So the field faculty advising team teaches those courses. And in that course, we talk about things like, how to engage, assess, and intervene at the organizational level. We talk about organizational theories. We talk about implementing ADEI at an organizational level, safety policies, all kinds of things through the lens of their actual field organization. So especially early in the semester, you might have a student coming to you and talking about their organizational assessment that they're completing. So they'll ask about, how they can get access to certain organizational policies and, ask you questions about how does this organization handle these types of scenarios. So that's where that's coming from. It's most likely from that organizational theory and practice course. And we appreciate that you're able to support them as they complete their organizational assessments and interventions. So let's talk a little bit about the difference between the generalist year and the specialized year. So the first half of their time in the program is that generalist year. The purpose of that is to develop those foundational skills, that foundational knowledge, foundational values, and cognitive and affective processes. So, it's not about building so much upward, but kind of like stretching it outward and side to side. So in that generalist year, we want students to develop across all 10 competencies and in all stages of practice. In addition, for their first year, their generalist year, we require that they practice at all 5 levels. So that's at the individual level, family level, group level, organizations, and communities. So even if the student is a community practice student, in their first year, they still need to be practicing with individuals and families. And vice versa, if the student is a direct practice student, or as we now call it, integrated health and wellness, in their first year, they still need to practice with organizations and communities. Again, that goes back to that notion of versatility. We really want to promote the versatility of this MSW degree. And when they're completing their learning agreements, based on if they're in their generalist or specialized year, their learning agreement will prompt them to create appropriate activities at the appropriate levels. So as long as they're using that nice structured learning agreement, which they all will be, that'll guide them through exactly what they need to be doing while they're in their field setting. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, I work at a clinical practice. We don't offer learning at the organizational or community level. Well, if you're part of an organization, the student can practice at the organizational level. If you're part of a community or your clients are part of the community, then the students can practice at that level. So sometimes what that means is we just need to put our heads together. And by we, I mean the student, you as a field instructor, and us as the field faculty advisors. And we have to be creative, and we have to create learning activities to make sure that they're practicing at all 5 of those levels. To be honest, at these 5 different levels, the one that tends to be challenging is practicing at the group level. So we try to be really creative, and even if it's not active engagement in that level of practice, it can, there can still be shadowing, there can be observing, discussions and supervision about it. Again, the goal is to be competent at the generalist level. Now with that, it's a little different for the student's second year or their specialized year. They're still required to have learning opportunities across all competencies and all stages of practice. However, if your student, if their concentration is integrated health and wellness, which is now known, it used to be known as direct practice, we simply require that they practice at the individual and family levels. If your student is a community practice student or a macro student, for their second year, they're only required to practice at the organizational and community levels. And again, their learning agreement will prompt them to craft activities and identify activities appropriately. So if you have a second year student, again, you want to be really focused on their area of concentration, whether it be at the micro or macro level with some meso mixed in there, of course. And that second year, that's where it really comes into play in terms of the student's path of study. So we listed all the paths of study that students can choose from in this, within the MSW program. So whenever we place a student, we try to make sure it aligns really well with the student's path of study. If you ever have concerns about maybe there's what seems to be an incongruence between the student's path of study and what they're doing in field, let's talk about it early. But we try to be very intentional about that during the placement process. So I mentioned this earlier, the Mandel School, we are the birthplace of competency-based learning for schools of social work, at the point of pride of ours. So we have these 10 competencies. So many of you, maybe you had competencies if you went somewhere other than the Mandel School. That's most likely the case because your school is probably also accredited by the Council on Social Work Education. The Council on Social Work Education requires competency-based learning. So we have them listed here. We're not going to read through all of them. Just know, again, students need to have learning activities and develop competence in all of these areas. Some of these that are more challenging than others oftentimes are, let's say, competency 5, engaging in policy practice. If they're part of an organization, if they're seeing clients, we can find a chance for them to learn about policies and how policies impact what they're doing, whether it be how policies are impacting their clients or how policies are crafted and changed and implemented at the organizational level. Those opportunities, we just have to be creative to find them. Another one that's difficult sometimes is that competency 9, evaluating practice. Sometimes students get evaluation and assessment confused, and sometimes there is overlap. But for evaluation, a common one is, if you're creating individualized service plans or treatment plans, that's built into it. You're working towards goals, you're evaluating progress towards goals, you're evaluating what's working, what could be better, et cetera. So, to be honest, most times, students can find activities across maybe 7 or 8 of these areas of competence, and then we have to be creative to identify activities in the other ones. So keep that in mind. We do encourage students to find those activities themselves, but then they might come to you to fill in some of those gaps where maybe they didn't see an opportunity to advance human rights and justice, or to intervene with families. So your students might be approaching you, and just be ready to talk through that. And again, if you're spinning your wheels and can't come up with that, talk with your field faculty advisor. I also want to stress these competencies aren't field specific. They're also embedded in all of our academic courses. So your students should be very familiar with these competencies, if not now, shortly into the semester. So we referenced this earlier. A big thing that we're constantly referencing from the field education standpoint are these EPOS, the Educational Policy and Accreditation Standards, set forth by the Counselor in Social Work Education, the CSWE. These just came out just a few years ago, so we've had to make sure that the EPOS are being satisfied in our policies and how we practice as a field education department. Competence is demonstrated and informed by these 4 items. I mentioned them earlier, but it bears repeating. Oftentimes we focus on the knowledge base. So, what do you know about these groups? What do you know about, different interventions? What do you know about theories? Skills, how are you applying this knowledge? What kind of practice skills are you starting to develop? And oftentimes, again, students are very focused on those first 2, knowledge and skills, knowledge and skills, knowledge and skills. We want to make sure we're also steering them to really develop a sense of values and also develop their processes. So how they're thinking and how they're feeling, how to navigate those mental and emotional challenges that we navigate as social workers. So any chance you get to talk with a student, work with a student through this, please do that. It's not always something that's linked to a direct client outcome, but it is definitely linked to the student's individual development as a social worker. So, if you can have those conversations about the student's values, and maybe if it's whether or not it's congruent with the NASW social work values, that's a good conversation to have. Anytime there's a conflict, dig into it, make sure it's a safe environment, but definitely explore it with the student. We want our students, and this, I think we'll talk about a little later, but we want our students to operate in some amount of discomfort. And sometimes those valued conversations can be a little uncomfortable, but a lot of growth comes from discomfort as long as it's approached with intention and with appropriate barriers set. The other thing with these last pieces of values and cognitive and affective processes, we can't just be reactive to it. So we can't wait for a conflict to occur. It's important that we're having these intentional conversations and making values and how we're feeling and how we kind of navigate these processes. Like, that should be a regular part of the conversation with our students. So I know there's a lot to cover with students and supervision, but if you can periodically reflect on those items, that just really adds to the student's overall and well-rounded development. So let's dig in and talk about the learning agreement. So many of you have worked with other schools, most likely. Sometimes it's called a learning contract, sometimes a learning agreement. We call it a learning agreement. This is a very important tool to map out the student's learning and to also gauge their progress throughout the semester. So first of all, this learning agreement lives in our Tavera system. If you're not familiar with Tavera, it's a system. We'll say it that way. It's a technology system. But the way it works is the student is prompted to create the learning agreement. They're prompted to fill out every field that's required. They sign off on it. It gets kicked over to you as a field instructor to review and approve it. So you'll receive a notification when it's ready for you to review. But with this learning agreement, we do ask that you and the student identify an overarching goal for the semester. So if your student is fresh into the MSW program, have a very appropriately scaled goal for the semester. If your student is in their second year and getting close to the end, again, make sure the goal is appropriate. We do want that to be driven by the student, though. Those are the most meaningful goals, is when they set that and work towards it. From there, the student will then identify or develop learning activities to work towards developing competence in all of those areas. So again, we encourage the student to identify these activities on their own. And then from there, they may approach you and talk about, okay, what are some, I haven't been able to identify an opportunity to, practice ADEI. What could this look like here in this organization? So just know they will likely come to you with some of those questions. And you know what, I encourage you to be really supportive and creative with it, and loop us as field faculty advisors into the conversation if need be. So once the learning agreement is filled out and the activities are identified, it'll be signed by by the student, and then you, and then the field faculty advisor, and it's all linear. After that, we don't want the learning agreement to just disappear. We don't want it to, the student creates it and then pulls it out in the last week of the semester. No, we want the student to regularly reference the learning agreement throughout the semester and chart their progress. If you're halfway through a semester, that should be clear on the learning agreement. Students should be able to look at the learning agreement and be making progress in half of those areas. And if not, that just means they need to be a little more intentional about those other areas they haven't gotten to yet. So again, this is on the student. We remind the students of this. Even if it's simply taking a look at it every couple of weeks in supervision, that's still incredibly helpful. All right. And then at the end of the semester, the learning agreement forms the basis of then evaluation. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. So with these learning activities that they're crafting, this should be new learning. It should not just be something that they've done before. So even if it's not fully new, we want there to be some aspects that are new and appropriately challenging. So maybe the student has already facilitated group sessions in their previous jobs. So to make it a new experience, maybe they implement a different curriculum they're not familiar with. Maybe they work with a different population for these group sessions. That's new learning, even if it's somewhat familiar to what they did in the past. The learning activities should definitely include anything you and the student are already planning for them to do. So if you have a list of items that you think the student should be engaging in, those items should be located on the learning agreement. So that's the other thing too, is we encourage the students to start by filling in the learning agreement with what they know they're already going to do. Again, we want to make sure that not just the competencies are being developed, but each competency has at least 2 or 3 practice behaviors that need to be addressed through the student's learning. And again, that's explicitly noted on the learning agreement. It just gives a little more direction in terms of what the student needs to be doing for each area of competence. And then again, if your student is a generalist or first-year student, They need to be practicing at all 5 levels. If they're a second year or a specialized student, they need to be practicing at the level appropriate with their path of study. So we wanted to share some examples of what a learning activity could look like. So this is competency 1, demonstrate ethical and professional behavior. So this is an example of an appropriate generalist year learning activity, actually 3 of them. So it might not seem like much, but it's important that you're reviewing the NASW Code of Ethics. Maybe they're attending a training on duty to warn. But then the last piece is the important one. Talk about it in supervision. That's that reflection piece that ties the learning together. Maybe you can connect them with some kind of an ethical training, so you can refer them to this training and then they bring it back to supervision to discuss the real application in your field setting. So again, those are pretty reasonable activities, especially for a generalist year student. I also want to mention the students have access to a nice little list we compiled of sample learning activities. So it's not meant to be copied, but it's meant to give them some direction. So we try to make sure they have a sense of what's appropriate for their level of the curriculum. So let's take a look at competency 6. So competency 6 is engaging with individuals, families, groups, organizations, and communities. Here's a good sample of a practice behavior: apply knowledge of human behavior and person environment, as well as interprofessional conceptual frameworks to engage with clients and constituencies. It's a mouthful, but that's appropriate. That's what we want the student to be kind of reaching by the end of the semester, that ability. So there are some very appropriate activities listed here at the generalist level. So one might be engage with families using systems theory during family counseling. Engage with the community by participating in community educational initiatives on mental health awareness. Like, those are very appropriate for a first year MSW student. What if we had let me back up here. Demonstrate ethical and professional behavior. Sometimes the learning activity we'll see is something like, I'll show up dressed professionally and on time. That's not really an appropriate learning activity for a master's level student. It might be necessary. It's always necessary for a student to do that, of course, but that's not appropriate. So if you start to see some things where you're thinking, this is more of a, this is very baseline stuff, let them know and give them some ideas of maybe a way they can bump it up to the next level for a master's level student.
All right, thanks, Jeff. So let's get into talking about supervision. I believe we should have time. Yes, for a small breakout group here. I'll put some questions here in the chat. Momentarily. Yeah. To reflect on. There we go. So kind of think about, push back in your same breakout groups here for about 5 minutes or so, but actually reflect on some of the questions here. So what's the difference between field instruction and work supervision? Think about how you prepare for and approach supervision with students. What does that look like for you? Does that change as you get to know students? Things like that. And then how can your supervision style support practicum students' development? So really thinking about the way you approach supervision and what that does for students and their learning throughout the course of the year. So we put you in breakouts here for a little bit and then call you back like we did before here for about 5 minutes or so. Talk. Right.
Just a reminder, you'll be prompted to join the room. So you do have to click on that button, unmute your audio, and then start your video once you're in there. Enjoy.
Hey Jeff, I took myself out of the group accidentally. Would you be able to put me back into the breakout room? Okay, on. What'd you say?
Sorry, I was muted. Thanks for being here. Yeah, let me move you to room.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Susan, do you want to be sent to a breakout room?
No, that's fine.
Notice you were still in here. All right, Rob, I think we're in good spot time wise.
Yeah. I'm 123, is that right?
Yeah.
Thank you for also getting the chat there.
Sure. Those of you that are still in this main room, you may need to actively click on the button to join one of the breakouts. So look for that little window, click on it, and join. So that's for Elizabeth, Paige, and Sharon. Hey, Elizabeth, Paige, and Sharon, are you able to join those breakouts? Do you need any assistance with that?
I'm going to have to hop off. Sorry, guys. Thank you so much for doing this.
Elizabeth and Sharon, do you need help with this? Getting in the breakout? You're both muted.
Close on mic participation.
Pardon?
They could just have their mics open. They're not there.
All right, Rob, you can take your time with talking about what they discussed in here, and also your slide. Like we're really good for time.
And we want to bring it back into the.
No, a couple more minutes.
into each question one at a time.
Sure. All right, I'll give him a heads up. Close.
Oh, I need to put myself on mute. Where's the button?
I don't know.
Hi.
As people are starting to return, you can just take a moment once you do get back to meeting them to meet yourself. That would be greatly appreciated. Get started here in a second. All right, welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a fruitful conversation. And we have some time, so I'm going to take a few minutes to kind of go through these questions. And just start with the first one. Feel free to raise your hand. What is the difference between field instruction and work supervision? What did you all talk about and your thoughts? Does anyone like to start with that one? Yep, go ahead, Haley.
Our group talked about field instruction as being something that happens more along the process of teaching the student, allowing them to shadow, things like that. But work supervision would be more intentional time set aside every week to do a lot of reflecting with the student, helping them even just like talk through their thought processes for decisions and things like that.
Thank you for sharing. Anybody else like to comment on that?
I guess I could mention
go ahead.
something.
Yeah, go for it.
Just that, it's a mindset to me. It's a difference between, as a field instructor, my goal is to help cultivate social work change agents in the field. And while that's also something that's great for, my supervisees as I'm employing folks, my intention is not necessarily to get them to meet my quotas or, certain deadlines and expectations as I would, in that case. I'm trying to help people figure out who they are in a social work world, where they want to go, how they're going to add to this practice. And that may mean that what's best for them and they're thriving in an academic setting does not mean that they end up being in my, world of social work, right? It might mean that they're somewhere else. And so wherever it is that they go, I want to help them get a foundation for that space. And so I think it's really just about the perspective has to be different, even though it's great to have someone that kind of help out with some of the tasks that I don't necessarily have a lot of time for, or whatever that might be. But my intention is to help them to be as successful and to finish their academic career successfully and know what they're going to do next.
Thank you so much for sharing. Love hearing all that from both of you. It's, from my time as a field instructor, one of the things that I kind of thought about with regard to this is that educational piece. They're here to learn and helping develop that and figure out their social work identity, or just, and also beyond that, right? So they're students. This is their classroom, their practicum. So something that I often thought about, the differences there. Yes, some things we have to go through regarding to work and how that goes, but they're there first and foremost as students. So how about that second question on how you prepare an approach for supervision? Oh, see Gretchen's hands up. Go ahead.
What we spoke about in my group, the first thing I like to do with my students is make sure that we've kind of done a rundown on our personal health, and where we stand. I make sure that we kind of go through our classes. Are we struggling? Do we need anything there? Is the schedule still working? Do we need a break? Are we going too fast? Are we going too slow? Just to make sure that we're meeting, that I'm meeting the students' expectations and what they want to get out of it. Because what I would, where I am may be different than them. I try to be pretty transparent and let them know that, some days I need a break. So I completely understand if they need a break. Just making sure that we're checking in as people first before we dive into anything else. Because if they're not there, then they're not really going to get anything out of the internship itself.
Yep. That's a very great point. I know even like the beginning of the semester when it comes sometimes for our classes, and sometimes there's things we want to get to as instructors, but if they have lots of questions, sometimes it's kind of, they have some anxiety questions, whatever it is, making sure we take time to address that, because otherwise those other things aren't going to be heard, right? So, so very much thank you for sharing that. Anyone else on that approach and how you prepare for supervision with students? And that last question, also just wanted to touch on, how can your supervision style support a practicum student? And I'll just say again, as a field instructor, I think we all I know I had a certain style, certain approach that wasn't necessarily the same as other field instructors that I worked with. So I kind of think about what your approach, how you do things, how does that help support a student? If you feel comfortable sharing, that would be great. So feel free to drop it in the chat as well.
Yeah, I would like to be laid back so that it's an opportunity to, share how things are going both in the classroom setting, but also, here at our health center, and where, they can feel free sharing what they would like to do, what they are doing. And, for me, I just want it to be a good experience. I don't want to be stressed. I don't want them to be stressed. And I want, there's no reason to have it be a stressful situation. So I just want that to be a comfortable place where people feel welcome and where we can both have a good experience. And I want to learn from them. I know they're going to teach me things, and I know they'll learn a lot too. So I just want to set up a good environment in that way.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I love it. I love that back and forth, also knowing that we're learning from them as we go as field instructors as well. Students have so much to contribute and teach us. So thank you. Anyone else? Move ahead. Well, thank you. I hope you all had wonderful conversations and hopefully learned some things from each other as well. We'll go ahead and we'll talk a little bit more about supervision. Starting with the supervision requirements. So as I mentioned before, it's 60 to 90 minutes of weekly individual supervision. I know there's some questions really, I think, in the chat as well about group supervision and how that can supplement, but we really want the students again to have that in 60 to 90 minutes. That's their time. That's something I know I emphasize as a field faculty advisor with them, that you want to make the most of it and use it well. Must be provided again by an MSW field instructor, and again, that group supervision piece. So. All right, so this kind of getting to the support of adult student learning, excuse me. And kind of thinking as an adult learner, we may feel confident in what we're doing, how we're doing it, kind of knowing just how to go about our day, right? And the activities that we have as employees and workers, as social workers. Students in the field, maybe not so much, right? Especially newer students who may not have any social work experience. This is new. They're not going to maybe feel as confident in their abilities. So in different ways to kind of support that, right? You can look over there on the left, that little wheel, if you will. Starting there with reflection and discussion. So using that supervision time to really kind of step back, process what's going on. It's really important for students to have. And I think as you hopefully start the year, building that relationship, think about how your style kind of helps also foster some of this with students. Moving on to the right there, that repeated practice. So kind of doing things over. Think about how long it took you maybe to figure out your electronic health record or how to do a certain task, and how many times you're going to reach out to someone else to help, and those feelings maybe of frustration or anxiety with whatever it is. So kind of, you've now been doing this. Students are coming in. We know they're also not there every day, right? So this is when they're there, they're really focused on that. So it's going to take that repeated practice, going through this whole cycle really. It can be more than once to before they kind of get the hang of it and feel comfortable. The last piece down, that observation, timely feedback, that really is important, especially that timely piece. So if you're noticing something, if there's something going on, not waiting, right? Because sometimes it can wait, and now it's been too long. Is it really the right time to address it, or will it still hit home in the same way? How's the student going to feel if you waited all this time? So making sure if you see something, kind of doing it early, that can also, again, help prevent some of those challenges later. So just taking the time to do that. And thinking about what support students need, helping them develop their own self-efficacy, and their identity. This is, for a lot of them, this is their first experience in social work. So this is going to be impactful once you do. So really being supportive and understanding what the students need and how to best provide that to them. So along with that, with this graphic here, I want to start at the top with understanding the field education requirements, and being that collaborative part of student learning. So knowing what exactly they need to do, what is required for their assignments, what's expected of them. And then developing realistic expectations. Again, I've worked with different students, and they've come in at different levels, their experience, what they want to do, what they feel comfortable. So your expectations, if you have more than one student, it might be a little different for each other, right? Or from the student you have this year compared to last. So understanding where each student is at and making sure those expectations are realistic. Again, kind of knowing when to push, knowing when to pull back. Teaching, also being willing to learn, making sure you're doing that with them. That next one there on the bottom is also being important, balancing flexibility and structure. You're building this relationship early on with the students, and as you go, you're going to get a better picture of students that might need more structure, students who need you to be a little more closely involved and paying attention to what they're doing. Whereas some others might need a little more flexibility, maybe it's with their schedule, maybe it's with the pace of learning, whatever that is. But learning how to balance that and figuring out what that is for the students you have. And again, I know from experience that can be a little bit of trial and error too, right? And trying to figure out what is, I've tried to, no, that didn't work, so let me go back and now I know for next time, right? Seeking out agency support, so and staying connected. So who else can really help you in that process, right? To do that. So again, we're here at the Mandel School to support. So if you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. We appreciate everything that you all are doing to support our students in their learning. And then that last one of being creative. So sometimes we have to figure out some different ways to get that learning across, right? So it might be a role play, it might be a discussion, it might be another activity that you haven't tried before. It's something new. But doing these things, and looking at all of them together, some you may be doing more than others, right? So there might be more of that staying connected piece for some students, and maybe more providing structure, depending on what they need. So kind of thinking about that and learning also as you're doing that with your students. And then this one here, so making the implicit explicit. One of the things I also think about too is don't assume that students get it. Some students might be quiet and you think, oh, well, they know what's going on. They don't have any questions. They might have a million questions going around their head and just not sure how to ask, or they may be afraid to ask. They don't want to seem like, oh, I don't know. Am I supposed to know this already? What's going to happen if I say I don't? So don't assume that. Really want to get foster that environment and encourage students to ask questions. We talked about making you feel comfortable. Some of that may come to as you have that supervised relationship moves forward. You get to know each other better, seeing what works. I think being transparent also is important. So letting them know exactly what you're thinking, discussing those assumptions, revisiting them. Again, you want to make it easy for students to ask questions, feel comfortable, and thinking about all of those things. I was just touch on the one on the bottom right there, the accurate feedback. That really will help them also to know kind of where they're at. And the one there on the bottom left also, so students better understanding the rationale, the why, right? You told me to do this, or told me to work this way with this particular client or try this approach, but I don't know why. And sometimes they may get stuck on that. So really letting them know, like, this is why we do this. This is, it may seem silly, but this is the importance of this, and helping them understand that. Because that can also alleviate some of that pressure, anxiety they might be feeling about their learning. And then balancing supervisory responsibilities. So we know there's different things that you have to get to in supervision. So again, making sure that having that consistent weekly supervision time, and it's meant going over different things, right? So we've talked about learning and reflection. We know there's going to be some also times talking about administrative issues. So it's figuring things out. Students again can help with their agenda, but we know there's going to be things that you want to talk about too. So figuring out kind of what works the best for that and making sure you have that balance to give them time to reflect on their learning while also addressing things that you need to during that time. And that's where that consistency comes in. So if you're missing supervision or it's cut short or for whatever it is, you can kind of throw a wrench in that. I mean, you're playing a little catch up at times. So try as best you can to balance that and still provide again the students that time for learning and reflection. I'll pass it back over to Jeff to talk about evaluation.
Thanks, Rob. Evaluation is a really important component of students' learning in field education. So we talked earlier about that learning agreement being kind of a roadmap. We then do an evaluation at the end of each field period to just kind of review how the semester's gone and also what's next. So we do have a couple of evaluations, which is a new approach for a couple of the formats. So for the weekly students, what they do is they create the learning agreement at the start of the semester. At the midpoint of the semester, we do something called an interim evaluation. That's just kind of a quick check of the pulse to see what kind of progress is being made across the 10 competencies. It's not terribly demanding of the field instructor. You literally will just open a form in Tavera and click on the box and choose the best appropriate answer. But that's a really important one, that interim evaluation, because it just checks in to make sure, okay, are we making progress in all 10 areas? And if not, okay, we still have half a semester to do so. So that's a really important tool that we use. At the end of the semester, we then complete the learning evaluation, which is a little more involved. It's really important that we take time on that evaluation and give helpful and honest and direct feedback. So one part of the evaluation is the student will do this first, but then you will also be tasked with rating the student's level of competence in each one of those 10 competency areas. These ratings aren't the same as like a letter grade or effort. It's literally like, what's their level of competence? And we'll look at the actual table that guides us through this process here in a minute. Keep in mind that, it's a very different level of expectations for a first-year student or a general student and a specialized or second-year student. So if you're working with a generalist year student, keep in mind they may have zero experience in social work. They might have an undergraduate degree in music or history or who knows what, and this is just a total career change. So when you're rating a student on the evaluation, we want you to rate them at the generalist level. So you shouldn't be comparing them to, you know, to a seasoned social worker who's been in the profession for years. You know, it's not fair. And to be honest, it's also not helpful. So what we want you to do is have it scaled appropriately based on whether the student's a generalist or a specialized year student. And we'll talk about that in a minute. One thing to also consider when you're working through this evaluation, try to consider the student's identity in the full context of who they are. So there might be some aspects of evaluation that are influenced by a student's identity. So when you're going through and doing your rating, there's also an opportunity to add comments in the evaluation. So anytime you can use those comments to kind of justify your rating and give additional context, that's incredibly helpful for us, and it's incredibly helpful for the student. So that's just one of those things that maybe is overlooked at times, but really try to approach the evaluation using an ADEI lens to understand what, you know, how their identity might be influencing their level of competence or their overall experience in field education. This last bullet point is an important one. Let me show you the next screen though first, so you have a little better context. So these are the ratings that you'll assign to a student on the evaluation, 0 to 4. A 0 means does not demonstrate competence at the generalist level. You'll see it steps up then to inconsistent competence, followed by a 2 means developing competence. A 3 means they're demonstrating competence, and a 4 means they're demonstrating advanced competence. So just by a quick glance at this table, can anyone tell if this is a generalist year evaluation rating or is this a specialized year evaluation? Let's see the first person to put it in the chat. Is this a generalist year rating or specialized? Yeah, generalist. Thank you, Alex. Those are some quick hands. Elizabeth, very good. Yeah, perfect. That's a silly question, you might think, but I just want to draw attention to the fact that it's listed right on there. So when you're doing the evaluation for the student, it really does scale it appropriately what to consider when you're assigning a rating. So this one, you know, it's at the generalist level. Please don't compare a generalist year student to a seasoned social worker. Sometimes we'll get students, or I'm sorry, field instructors that will say, student's great for a student, but they're still a student. So at most I'll give them a 2 because they're still developing. No, if they're great for a student, that's a 3 or maybe even a 4. You have to compare them to what's realistically expected of a generalist year student, what's realistic to expect of a specialized year student. So really keep that in mind. That's very helpful for a student to be able to see where they stand in your eyes and from your perspective. Once you complete the evaluation, that's not the end of it either, because first the student does their part. So they assign their ratings, they provide some comments. You assign your ratings, you provide some comments. The next step though is vital. We really encourage the students to then get together with you and have a conversation about it, even if it's uncomfortable. So if there's a discrepancy in the ratings where you're rating a student at a 2, you think that they're developing competence, but they're thinking they're advanced. They're thinking, I'm a 4. I'm just knocking this out of the park. It is vital that the two of you have a conversation to kind of reconcile those differences and share your respective interpretations of this. Especially if it's in the first semester, you have to have a better understanding of your respective expectations as you go into that next semester of field education. So really be intentional about having that conversation. To be honest too, even if your ratings are the same, let's say you rate a student for competency 7 with a 3, you think they're competent, and they also rate a 3, talk about it. Talk about, okay, what does that mean? How do we bump this up from a 3 to a 4 next time? Really have a nice intentional conversation at the end of the semester about this. And again, we remind the students to do this, we ask them to do it, but we would appreciate if you can also help initiate those conversations. I also want to talk about that rating of 0. That does not mean like lack of learning opportunity. Sometimes, you'll get to the end of the semester and you'll say, you know what, the student didn't have a chance to engage in policy practice, so they get a 0. That's not what a 0 is. A 0 means they're not competent. That means that, they have not managed the activities in a competent fashion. They have substandard levels of knowledge, skills, values, or processes. There should not be an instance of there were no activities in this area. We want to be very intentional, first of all, when we're crafting the learning agreement at the start of the field period. And then throughout the semester, we want to make sure that there is progress being made in each one of these areas. So we stress to students that that's not an acceptable answer at the end of the semester. Well, I couldn't get to it. No, you need to. You absolutely need to. So we're going to continue to remind students of that. But again, that just highlights the need to regularly review the students' progress in the learning agreement throughout the semester. The other thing I want to stress is we really appreciate any kind of feedback. Even if a student is a fantastic student, tell us why. Paint the picture for us. Talk about some of these successes, the impact they're making. That's incredibly helpful for us as field faculty advisors. And even if you talk about it with the student, it's good for them to see it in writing just to reinforce, what's working for them. Okay. Let's talk about resources here. So on this slide, you'll see the one link at the top. I think we put it in the chat a couple of times. We have this field education resource webpage that is hopefully will be a go-to for you to find things like the field education calendar, the field education manuals, our Tavera tutorials, information about trainings and events. That resource page has some good information. So if you're not familiar with it, I encourage you to check it out, bookmark it, and check it frequently. This last piece is another big one. As a field instructor, that can give you access to the Harris Library, including the various, periodicals and journals and things that we have, we have membership with. So if you're interested in gaining access to the library, just send us an email at mandelfield@case.edu. I believe you just need to include your full name, including a middle initial, and then we'll set up your account and email you that information. So you're then able to access some of the digital resources through the Harris Library. And that can be a really nice perk of being a field instructor. So actually, instead of that, I would ask that you fill out this evaluation. I'm going to put it in the chat if you have a moment. Okay, so I just put it in the chat. It's a link to the evaluation. This is incredibly helpful. If you have some ideas about future trainings that will support you as a field instructor, please include that. We do look at this when we plan out our trainings for the year. We try to get a good sense of, what field instructors want, especially because, again, we always go back to the fact that you're doing this voluntarily. At least most of you are, I assume. So we do want to give back. We want these trainings to be tailored to some of your interests and your needs and what'll help support you as a field instructor. So please share that information. And I can't stress it enough. We couldn't do any of this without you as field instructors. I absolutely love that our profession operates in this way, where, we're giving back, we're contributing to the profession in a positive way. We're supporting individual students. I know a lot of you are Mandel School alums, so thank you for those of you that remain connected with us. And ultimately, we've talked about all these guidelines and rules and how to operate as a field instructor, but we hope this is a pleasant experience for you. A lot of our partners love having a fresh set of eyes and ears in their setting and someone that has some new thoughts and new ideas. and is comfortable to voice that. So we hope it's mutually beneficial, not just for our students, but also for you individually as a field instructor, also for your organization, also for the clients and communities that our students are impacting. So we hope it's mutually beneficial. If you ever have any questions about a student situation or their experience overall, work directly with the field faculty advisor. If you have overall programmatic questions or needs, again, you can reach out to us at mandelfield@case.edu, and we'll be happy to support you. But otherwise, again, we have just a extremely high amount of gratitude for all that you're doing, all that you have done, and what you're going to continue to do as field instructors. So thank you very much. Thanks for being here on a Friday. If anyone has any questions or wants to talk, feel free to stay in here and we can chat for a couple minutes. Otherwise, have yourselves a great Labor Day weekend. Thanks, everybody.
I do have a question, sort of.